Our first topic here is strategies to reduce sow mortality in a large swine production system. Our speakers are both on staff at Iowa Select Farms. Alexander Umbaugh helps educate and train as it relates to sow livability and body condition. He works with supervisors, managers, veterinarians, and other support departments to create livability solutions for specific farms. He has worked as a breeding department head in 3 different sow units and was part of starting a new 7,500 head site back in 2019. Dr. Cesar Moura is a DVM. He received his DVM in Brazil back in 2015, and then he came to Iowa State and got his PhD in 2020, and he's a research manager at Iowa Select Farms. So please help me welcome Alexander and Cesar. It's your show.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all here and have you guys attend our session over sow mortality and the efforts that we have done within Iowa Select Farms to try to reduce it. This is actually my first time here at this conference, so Cesar and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the IPIC Conference Committee for allowing us to come here and speak in front of you all today. So before we start getting into some of our agenda items, Cesar and I are going to do some quick introductions of ourselves. So for those of you that may not know me, my name is Alex Umbaugh. I'm currently the sow retention specialist for the company. I've been in my role for about 3 years now, focusing on improving sow livability and body condition. I began my career back in 2017 working as an intern for a GDU. Really enjoyed my time there. Went back to school and graduated in 2018 from Iowa State University. After graduation, worked at a handful of different sow farms, either as a breeding department lead or department head. I was approached by our senior director of sow operations and asked if I'd be interested in becoming the body condition specialist. I did that for about a year and really focused on feed usage, body condition scoring, anything that relates to those 2 areas. And then that position eventually turned into the sow retention role that I'm in today.
So my name is Cesar Moura. So I'm from Brazil. I went to the vet school there and then got my PhD here. And then now I am a research manager at Iowa Select. So I basically oversee all the data analysis, field studies, research trials, data reports, mostly working with windshield finishes. We don't have any research sow farms yet.
So here's kind of just the agenda that we have outlined for you guys today. So we'll talk a little bit about the company, and then Cesar will go through some research updates, and then I'll kind of talk through some key actions that we believe have helped reduce sow mortality within our system. We'll go through some results and then take it home with some take-home messages for you guys. So just a little bit about the company. We are a family-owned company owned by Jeff and Deb Hansen. We're currently the 4th largest in the United States. We have around 800 facilities, a little over 1,200 employees with 650 contractors, and we have around 5 million hogs today. So what is a sow retention specialist? So let me ask this question to you guys. How many of you have ever heard of a sow retention specialist, or maybe someone that does something similar in that role at your company? That's all right. 3 years ago, we didn't either. So basically, a sow retention specialist is someone that helps educate and train as it relates to sow mortality. So today, there's currently 2 of us, Valeria and myself. Valeria is in southern Iowa, which she deals with primarily Spanish-speaking individuals, and myself in northern Iowa. So it kind of just started off with myself going to farm, and what we realized is we need more help and more people on the SLAT level to work with those people individually. So that's why we hired Val on, and it's made a huge, tremendous success by having 2 people to get into every farm once a quarter. So a little bit about why the role was created. So we have 7 direct supervisors today, which they cover around 36,000 sows per supervisor. So there's a lot that goes on, with a supervisor's responsibilities. So There's a lot of organization, movements, a lot of people issues that they have to do. So there's a lot of things that drive them away from actually focusing on sow mortality and body condition. So that's kind of why the position was created, is that we can work individually with those crews and come up with solutions for each specific farm. So just wanted to highlight one slide here for you guys before we get into some of the key actions. We actually have a sow livability task force that meets every 1 to 2 months. And what's actually kind of unique about this group is this group consists of nutritionists, veterinarians, GDU, sow supervisors, so kind of just a wide variety of different people. So we get all these ideas and we all collaborate and come up with good solutions for our sow farms today.
All right. So I'll start presenting here some of the research that we've been doing over the last few years and sharing a few numbers before Alex jump in and present the strategies that we actually implemented. So just wanted to start showing the actual numbers that we have over the last few years. And then like Alex shared, we started this the sow livability task force team on 2021, and that's when our sow mortality as a company was pretty high, and then we definitely had to, do something. And then, as you can see, the mortality over 2022 and currently in 2023 have been reduced compared to 2021. So it's, it's a win that we have, and I believe that it was a lot of that has been dragged based on the strategies that were implemented during those meetings. So touch base here on a few research updates. So the first thing that we've done when we started the sow livability task force team was to gather data over the past few years and try to understand the areas of opportunities. So we started working on this data analysis here. It's a big data analysis that we put together, and then with the outcome was the number of dead sows every week, and then we put a big model, multifactorial model together with the help of the folks at ISU, and I just to identify some risk factors and trying to understand a few things for us to put focus on. So I'll share here a few things that we've learned. So I'll basically go and touch on 3 lessons that we have learned over the last 3 years regarding research. The first one is health is our biggest risk factor. So all of our sow farms are placed in Iowa, so it's a big challenge, to deal with it since it's pretty high density. And then once we start putting together the model and start looking at a few variables here, we can see the PERD status. So that goes from 0 is negative, 1 is endemic, and 2 is epidemic. So we can see when we have PERD breaks in our sow farms, and that happens a lot, we see our sow mortality goes really high. Another thing is a lot of our sow farms are positive for mycoplasma and some are negative. So we can see also that just, being mycoplasma positive has an impact on sow mortality as well. So here's Seneca. We actually last year we had a bunch of sow farms going positive for Seneca. And then as you can see in the slide, it didn't really increase the average, but it just increased the variability. So what can we do about it, right? So we identified the risk factors, a lot of health challenges, but what can we do about it? So there were a lot of things that we tried. So we tried treating our sow farms with probiotics. And so we've done an analysis last winter, and we saw that we can actually help to reduce sow mortality when we feed those probiotics in. So we start implementing some feed meds, some feed pulses on feed, and then we usually do them every quarter. And we can see that when we do the pulses and right after the pulses implemented, we can see a reduction in sow mortality compared to those other weeks that are not medicated, and also biosecurity, right? Biosecurity is So very important to avoid those diseases to get into the herd. So the second lesson is there are a lot of non-infections risk factors too, right? So we have moving a lot of our system into open pen gestations, and we can see that the farms that have pens have a much higher mortality compared to the stalls. To the stall farms, it's a big challenge to deal with the sows when they're in the pens. And then just by breeding the gilts at a higher age and a higher weight, we can see a lot of increased mortality. So this is one analysis that we've done. It's a logistic regression analysis. Then we can see here that just when we breed sows overweight or with a higher age compared to the recommended, we see the retention odds at P3 increase by about 10%. So another thing that we've done that we looked at is the lost in body condition during farrowing. So this is a study that we've done. Alex conducted this study in the field, and we went out to a few farms and selected a few sows, and we calipered them at farrow and at wean, and then we saw that the ones that lost most of condition during the farrowing phase were the ones with the worst performance. So this is one big area for us as well to stimulate consumption during the farrowing. It's a big area for us. And then here is just an average by parity. So we can see that it basically it's a linear increase here as you decrease parity. So the P1s are the most challenged ones. That's when we really struggle to get them to eat at farrowing. They are the ones that lose most of the condition. So a few things that we've tried is, so we've done a few trials with enrichment devices in the pens. That's something that we haven't actually started at sows, but we've done with the gilts, with the grow-out gilts, and we've seen see here a table with the results, and then we saw that when we put the toys, we can reduce the removals, and we also saw a reduction in bites, like fights and bites, when you use the toys. And then here's just a graph. The blue line is the control that did not have any toys, and then we can see that those bites, those bad interactions, they increase over time, while when we put the toys, they actually reduce. So it's something that we are interested in trying to look forward on a sows. Just other things as well, we saw that when we breed younger and lighter gilts, we tend to have them longer in a herd. We reduce the removal of those animals. So one other thing that Alex is going to mention on this, but we have a lot of strategies to try to identify the sows that goes off feed, especially post-farrow. That's one thing that we've done and really helped in reducing sow mortality and stimulate the animals to eat post-farrow. So it's one of the big challenges for us. In the lesson 3, so 90% of our death losses fall into these 3 main causes. I don't think that this is a surprise for anybody here. That's pretty common in other systems as well. So what can we do about it? We know the cause, right? But what can we do about it? So prolapses. Prolapses is, at least in our system, is usually a young sow issue. We tend to see more prolapses on P1s, P2s, and P3s. Not responsive to antibiotics. We've tested mass treatments. We tested vaginal infusions pre-farrow, and we didn't see any reduction in the prolapses. We looked at different ages at breeding and weights at breeding as well, and then we didn't see any difference. So one thing that we've been doing is repairing those prolapses. We don't avoid those prolapses to happen, but at least we don't have to euthanize the sows. Lameness, it's a big problem as well. It's also a young sow issue. So we can reduce a lot of our lameness issues when we breed the gilts earlier. That's something that really help. Open pen gestations, it make it a lot worse, for sure. They get hurt, they fight, and that makes really worse the problem. And then one thing that we've been conducting in our system is a toenail, and we have implemented that, and it was not as hard as we thought it would, and it really helped, really see some positive results, and we're implementing. Sudden deaths, that's a big problem. It's usually an old sow issue, most of them are around farrowing, right before, right after farrowing. Very responsive to antibiotic treatments. When we do the feed pulses, we tend to see a reduction, a big reduction actually, in sudden deaths. But we don't really know what's a sudden death. It's a big variety of things. So we haven't really done a lot in sudden deaths, but we are now putting efforts on a necropsy project with ISU as well, and trying to really better understand the causes and what's behind just, the sudden death.
So here's kind of a list of some key actions that we believe have helped drive sow mortality down within our system. And I would say a lot of these ideas and actions were brought forward in that sow livability group that I just talked about earlier. So the first action is our weekly sow mortality report that gets sent out on a weekly basis. So this sow mortality report gives you a 13-week average of what your farms are having in mortality. So we lump our mortality into 3 main buckets. So you have your lames, your suddens, and your prolapses, like Cesar said. And Valeria and I utilize this report a lot when we go on our farms before we get into the farms, just so we have an understanding of what areas we need to focus on. And so what I can say about this is, when Cesar sends this out every week or every Friday, a lot of people are looking forward to this just to see how well their farm has improved. But it's gained a lot of traction, and it's definitely helped us understand what areas we can improve on. Team choring, so this is something that we adopted about a year ago. We collaborated with Iowa State and did some studies. So how this works is we actually have one person in the front of the crate and one person in the back of the crate. So in the front of the crate, the person would be responsible for making sure that the sow has feed, scraping the feeder, checking the water nipple, and then getting a different angle on the sow from the front. The person in the back would be responsible for any heat lamp adjustments, looking at the sow on her back, feet, and legs, and then scraping manure as well. The things that we've noticed with this is we saw a pretty significant increase in treatments once we started doing this. And so what's kind of nice about this is, you can actually pair up people that may have more experience with someone that might not have a lot of experience. That way, if that person does have questions, that person's right there to assist them. Now, this might vary from farm to farm based on staffing levels, but for the most part, it's been a big success. Today, we have 100% of our farms doing it in farrowing, with around 80% of our farms doing it in gestation. So in gestation, we actually have one person that runs through the pens. So, excuse me, let me say this. At Iowa Select, we have a few farms that are Prop 12 compliant, a few farms that are all stalled, and then a few farms that are open pen gestating. So for our open pen gestating farms, we actually have one person that runs through the pens, and they're responsible for making sure that the pen's uniform and identifying anything that's at risk. The person in the alleyway would be responsible for any feed box adjustments, or they can assist that person if there's a sow that needs to be pulled out. They don't have to wait until, the afternoon to pull that sow out. As soon as they find an at-risk sow, they can get her out as soon as possible. Here's just kind of a chart showing some farms 20 weeks before and 20 weeks after we executed the team choring process. So as you can see, a majority of the farms did see a pretty good reduction in sow mortality after implementing the 2-person choring. Not every farm did, whether that may be a function of short staffing or a function of health. But for the most part, it was a pretty good success when you have 2 people choring together. So here's just an example of a farm that might have had a little bit of hesitation to do this. This is one of the farms that we really struggled to get on board with from a team shoring aspect. And so what I told the crew was, just give me 10 weeks. Let's try it for 10 weeks, and then let's go back and reevaluate to see if we've actually made an improvement. So we did it. We came up with an SOP. We executed it for 10 weeks. And before we implemented it, we were seeing about 26.5 dead sows per week. And afterwards, we saw the farm achieve a 19.5 sow deaths per week, which is currently their target. And this was a 7,500 head site. So we kind of use the diet analogy. You have to continue to work and work every day and keep things consistent if you want to see results. So like I said, there was a little bit of a hesitation at first. We were concerned that it would take a little more time. We didn't think it would make a large impact. There were some farms that I would say were on board with it, but then there were some farms that weren't. But I think the biggest buy-in, or where you save the most time, is instead of trying to haul a dead sow out of a pen, you think about how much time that takes to get the Hercules, get her to the pen, get that sow up on the Hercules, and then bring her to the transition room. That takes a lot of time. So if we're able to identify more at-risk sows and get them treated, get them to a hospital row or pen and save those sows, it saves us time in the long run. Action 3 would be hand feeding post-farrow. So this is kind of the old school way of feeding our sows. So before we implemented this, we would go ahead and turn the feeders on to full feed if a sow farrowed. And what we felt like, we saw a lot of sows that crashed and didn't feel very good once we turned them on full feed after they got done with their farrowing event. So we decided to hand feed them for the first 3 days post-farrow. So for the first day, she would actually get 4 pounds in the morning. The second day, she would get 4 pounds in the morning, 4 pounds in the afternoon. And then on the third day, or day 2, she would get 4 pounds in the morning. And then if she cleans that up and confirms that she's on feed, we'll go ahead and turn that feeder on. It's helped tremendously with farrow and feed cost, and it's a lot easier to identify the sows that maybe didn't clean up their feed from the night before, and so then therefore we can get a treatment administered on them in a timely manner. Action 4 would be the at-risk sow identification. So at Iowa Select Farms, we use the ABC analogy. A would stand for at risk, B would stand for basic, and C would stand for critical. So below is a list of examples that would be anything that would be considered at risk or abnormal. So anything that would be toe tapping, non-compete, off feed, structure, low condition. So if we identify these sows, we go ahead and get a pink card on them. So that pink card would signify that she is at risk and that there's something abnormal with her. And so one thing that we did or changed was how we actually pen these sows. So today we actually go ahead and get all of our sows up before we pen them, and then we go to the back of the crates with a flashlight and then look at their feet and legs to identify if they have any small wounds, long toenails, anything that would make them at risk, flag them, and then actually group those sows together and then group them into our gestation snake. So overall, this process has been going pretty well. There's a lot more thought put into this process. We're making a lot more uniform pens and not just selecting the first 12 that we come across. We're not putting our body condition 1 sows with body condition 3s, just because there's a pretty wide range in feed rations when it comes to those 2 condition scores. And like I said, it just overall a lot more thought put into this process, and our sows are staying in our pens a lot longer. Condition scoring with a caliper. This is something that we adopted about 3 years ago, and this is something that I would say we really enjoy using within the company. What we found before we started using the caliper was there was a lot of variation farm to farm, not only farm to farm, but person to person when it comes to condition scoring. You might call this sow a 2, but I might call her a 1, but with the caliper, it kind of standardizes everything and allows us to keep things consistent. So today we actually caliper our sows at breeding, 30 days, pre-penning, 60 days, and 90 days if they're on an all-stalled farm. How we do this is we actually will go ahead and place a last rib identification mark on the sow's last rib. That blue mark would identify that the sow's in heat, and then that's a place where the caliper will go. So we actually have 3 readings. We have thin, ideal, and fat. Our thins will get 6 pounds, our ideals will get 5, and our fats will get 4. Valeria and I actually conduct evaluations on farms, and we'll actually go through and check to make sure that our caliper accuracy is where it needs to be. And so we'll go through and pick about 100 sows out of each group, and then we'll give a score to that farm, and then that score will be factored into their bonus. So here's just a chart of the caliper accuracy quarter on quarter over the last few years. So as you can see, each quarter we continue to improve and get very close to achieving our goal of a 95%. One thing I didn't include here was when we first started implementing the caliper, we were around a 78%. So definitely a large improvement to the first time that we used it up until now. Some of the effects on the caliper, I think before we started using the caliper, or when we first started using the caliper, the one thing that we noticed was there was a lot of body condition 1 sows that were entering a farrow install, upwards of 43, 45%. And so as we continue to use the caliper, as you can see, we reduced that, and now we're up to, or below, around a 15, 19%, which is a pretty significant decrease in body condition. Gilt entry. So at Iowa Select Farms, we have some farms that receive gilts at an off-site breeding project or an off-site GDU, and then we have some farms that actually breed their gilts on-site. So if we know that those gilts are going to arrive within a short time period, we'll actually reserve a hospital pen before those gilts get to the farm. After the gilts get to the farm, we'll do a 1-hour walkthrough and get all those gilts back up, and then identify anything that is lame or stiff caused by transportation. We'll go ahead and run that barn on aspirin for 5 days, and then we'll make sure that each gilt receives 4 pounds of feed once they get into the farm. Stall acclimating. This is one thing that we try to do with our gilts, just so they get acclimated to a crate, just because some of them haven't seen a crate before. So about a week before they're entered into a farrow stall, we'll run through a crate, have them understand where the water nipple is, and just kind of get them acclimated. Once they enter a farrow stall, we try to make sure that we get those gilts up twice a day for maximum water and feed intake. So we show them where the water nipple is. We'll put clothespins, rubber bands, pieces of paper, anything that can allow that sow to understand where that water nipple is. Sometimes we use peanut butter, to attract the sow to the water nipple. We've also used attractant to top dress the feed to try to get some of those gilts that might struggle to get on feed a little bit quicker. Action 8 would be toenail trimming. I'll be honest with you guys, when I brought this forward to our sow livability group, I got a lot of people that were pretty skeptical about this process, just because we don't have chutes within our system, so it's kind of hard to actually go ahead and perform that process. But we outsourced and had someone come in and train us on how to properly trim sows' toenails with not a lot of labor. So we actually just use tree loppers, and so we actually go 3 fingers from the coronary band and make that cut. And so we usually try to do it in farrowing, so that way you can get on both sides of the sow. One thing that we noticed is it doesn't take a lot of time. It's not a whole process. It might be a sow here and there. And I think the ultimate goal, if you can get one more parity out of that sow, or, if you trim a sow's toenail before you put her in a pen, she's more likely to go into an at-risk pen versus into a hospital row where it can jam up your row and then potentially not allow more critical sows to go into that hospital row. Breeding flashcards, this is something that is not required at every single farm, but we just asked some of the farms that have struggled to keep things consistent, whether that be team shoring or treatments or anything that relates to sow mortality. So we actually have some of our crews actually fill out these flashcards, and they can actually show us who's shoring what barn each day, who chored what barn each day, the number of sows they pulled from that pen, how many new treatments they administered, where their sow deads came from in gestation, and then the reasons for that. And so it just kind of brings some ownership to those breeding department heads, and it requires them to tell you what went on during that week without you being at the farm. So our last action for you guys is a sow livability quiz. And this is something that Valerian and myself just got done doing. So It's been kind of a fun activity. So this quiz consists of 25 questions going over livability questions, body condition questions, feed usage questions, treatment questions, anything that relates to those areas. So it just helps spark, some friendly competition amongst sow farms. So the rules of this game are the supervisors and the managers are not allowed to participate. It's only allowed for the department heads and below to fill this out. And so it's been a very useful and fun activity for all the farms to participate in.
All right, so let me just share a few numbers. Here on your right side, there's a legend, and I'm sorry it's a bit small, but the blue line is going to be the year of 2020. The red line would be the year of 2022. The green line is the year of the blue 2020, the red 2021, the green 2022, and the purple is 2023. So we've been sharing this graph just to monitor the trends on sow mortality week to week, and it's a good way to see where we are, and then the practices that we implement as a system have been working or not. So it's just a way for us to keep track. So sow mortality is something that goes up and down. We're gonna have some health challenges and mortality is gonna go up, but then we implement our practices, and then it's good to see that it trending back down. But we need to learn how to address those issues and how to live with that, because nothing is gonna be perfect every week. So on a y-axis is the annualized sow mortality. So here is the prolapse. Is the prolapse mortality. And then on the years of 2020 and 2022, 2020 and 2021, which is the red and blue lines, the prolapse were really high. And then once we implemented the caliper, and then we start fixing the prolapse, we saw a big reduction. Like right now we're in a very one of the lowest rates of prolapses that we've been over the last few years. Lameness mortality is the same. We have seen a big reduction over the past 2 years compared to 2020 and 2021. So we still have more sows on pens, and it's still a struggle, but we can breed the gilts at the right age and put more focus on, and like Alex mentioned, the 2-team choring strategy is something that really helped. So sudden death is something that we cannot really act on. We've tried multiple different things, but it's really hard to really get the sudden death rate to go down, because in reality we know it's sudden, but we don't really know what we're dealing with, right? So different sow farms can have different reasons for sudden death. So we're trying to investigate more, trying to understand the real cause of sudden deaths at each sow farm. But as you can see, year after year, the mortality just kept the same.
So just some take-home messages for you guys. Education goes a long way. The more that you can benchmark and have your crews understand where you are and where you guys want to go, the better. And also celebrate the small wins. If you have a crew that might have had a 16% one week and then the next week they had a 15%, that's a huge win, and how do you build off that? Understand what the problems are and how to address them with your crew. So the things that we do is try to utilize that report that Caesar sends out on a weekly basis, look at that and see where we've improved on. Consistency is key. I can't stress that enough. Especially with that 2-person choring, Monday through Friday, every single day, If we get down to shorter staffing levels, how do we adjust, and how do we continue to move forward with that? And be willing to try different things. Don't settle for mediocrity. I've dealt with a lot of people that have said, I've been doing this for 25 years and my way's the best. Well, I respect that, but at the same time, the way that we raise pigs today is a little bit different than we raised pigs, 25, 50 years ago. So, be willing to change, be willing to accept different ideas, and continue to work with your crew to have the best results for your farm. So that concludes Cesar and I's presentation. Again, we want to thank the IPIC Conference Committee for allowing us to come here and speak in front of you all today. I believe we have enough time for a couple questions, if anybody has any.
When you talk about weight and age and deals of babies, what is your target for that?
So it's basically the what the genetics recommend, and then right now we're at 35 weeks at breeding and 350 pounds.
350 pounds?
290 pounds, yeah.
Do you guys have any ESF gestation barns?
No, all of our gestation pens, they're basically drop boxes.
You talked about you have some contracted in your system. Is that on the south side as well? Okay.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question is that we have some contractors in our system, but that's going to be mostly on finishing.
So when you want to implement something company-wide to try and influence one of these markers, the sour retention, do you just take it on a regional approach and get everybody on board and then reevaluate it, or what's the thought process?
Yeah, so we just kind of started with the sows and GDUs for now. As we move forward, we might look into doing something on the finishing side with them, but for now, it's strictly just sows and GDUs.
I have one. What do you think, kind of your cost, extra labor? Do you have any kind of an estimate on that when you started implementing these things?
Extra labor. You haven't? No, I have no information on that. For one thing that we know is that a lot of the managers, they would thought that the 2-person choring would actually require more work to implement, but it ends up not being the case because they actually help us to reduce sow mortality, right? So you maybe spend some more time on some tasks, but then you have less dead sows, to be dragged out of the sow farm every day. So
Yeah, and I would say, on those short staffing farms, that is kind of the struggle, especially with the 2-person choring. So, we try to be a little bit flexible and say, maybe it's only certain areas that we do the 2-person choring. Maybe it's our gilts. Maybe it's our hospital rows. Maybe you only do it 3 times a week. So there's a little more flexibility on those short staffing farms. But, on the full staff farms, we try to keep it consistent Monday through Friday.
You said you dropped your mortality rates due to prolapses considerably. How much of that was the function of that you're fixing it now?
yeah, that's a good point. So I believe that reduction, the biggest reduction that we saw over the last 2 years was in prolapses compared to the other causes. And then, so at some point, we're just asking ourselves, are we avoiding the prolapses to happen, or we just fixing them and then they still happen at the same rate, right? So we have another graph that we actually send to the farms that it's not the prolapses, it's basically the prolapse incidence. And we saw that reduction as well. The reduction in incidence of prolapses, which is going to include, rectal prolapses, vaginal prolapses, and the ones that get repaired as well. And we saw a reduction. A lot of that reduction, we believe that is due to a better conditioning of our sows, because we have been putting a lot of focus on the caliper, and then we believe that this is we cannot prove, we cannot say, but we believe that that's mostly due to the better condition of our sow farms.
One more back there.
Are you guys able to see a breakdown of all the sows that you repaired as to how many of them that made it to culling, how many of them died from another reason, or how many of them were high-value sows after repair?
Yeah, so mostly, Alex can say better than me, but mostly, most of the sows are around fairing, and then we don't breed it again. We just we cool them. We don't have to euthanize them at farm, right? But we at least put it in a cool truck, so we don't breed them back.
Let's thank Cesar and Alex.